My husband put his mom before me for 6 years, so I made him choose one final time. I used to lie to myself every night. I told myself it was just cultural, that mothers and sons are supposed to be close, that his mom, Janice, only hovered because she loved him so much. But deep down, I knew better. Janice didn't just hover, she invaded. She inserted herself into every part of our marriage like it was her birthright. When we bought our first home, she picked the furniture. When we started planning a family, she sent me a list of healthy fertility foods and told me how long I should wait between kids. And every time I said something, every time I tried to claim space as a wife, she'd smile sweetly and say, "I'm just helping. After all, I know what's best for my son." And worst of all, my husband Nick never stopped her. He didn't defend me. He didn't push back. He just stood there, torn between loyalty and guilt, and always chose the path of least resistance, which meant choosing her every single time. The first time I truly felt like I was invisible was during our honeymoon. We were in Maui, supposed to be unplugged and off the grid, but Nick kept checking his phone, texting, calling, FaceTiming her. "She just misses us," he said, like it was sweet. On the third day, I woke up to find him sitting on the balcony, laughing with her on speakerphone. I asked him to please just give us a few days. He agreed, only to sneak off an hour later to call her again from the hotel lobby. That's when the pattern began. She'd always insert herself, and he'd always let her. From picking our wedding menu to dictating where we spent the holidays, it was clear. I married both of them. But I stayed. I kept hoping things would get better, that Nick would grow up, set boundaries, realize he had a wife now. I even tried bonding with Janice to show her I wasn't competition. I invited her to brunches, let her redecorate our guest room, even wore that god-awful necklace she gave me to match her favorite color. And still, she found new ways to dig deeper. When I told her I got promoted at work, she said, "That's great, but make sure it doesn't distract you from taking care of my son." And when Nick and I fought over anything, she always called to say, "Sweetheart, maybe she's just not mature enough for marriage." She was driving a wedge between us, and Nick was too blind, or too spineless, to stop it. Still, I held on. I believed that love was about sacrifice, about patience, about earning trust. But one night, something broke. I was sick, fever, chills, nauseous. Nick was supposed to be home early to take care of me, but I woke up on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m. alone. I checked my phone. He had texted, "Mom needed help moving her couch. Be back soon." No apology, no concern, just another reminder of where I stood in his priorities. That night, lying on the cold tile, I stopped making excuses. I stopped hoping. I stopped begging. And in that still, painful silence, I made a decision. I was going to make him choose. One of us was walking away. And this time, it wasn't going to be me. The morning after I passed out in the bathroom, I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just watched Nick come home like nothing happened. He brought me ginger tea, his mother's recipe, of course, and told me I should have called if I felt worse. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "I was unconscious." He blinked, looked down, and muttered, "I didn't know it was that bad." That was it. No guilt, no real apology, just that same tired, spineless excuse. And I realized I could scream until I lost my voice and it still wouldn't matter, because he didn't hear me. He never had. His mother was the voice in his head, and I was just background noise in my own marriage. So I started planning, not to leave, not yet, but to test him. One final time, not with words, with choices. I stopped mentioning her. I stopped fighting. I went quiet, and I watched. I planned a weekend getaway, just the two of us, our first real time alone in months. I told him I'd already cleared it with work, booked the cabin, arranged everything. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "That sounds amazing." For once, I believed maybe, just maybe, he'd show up. Maybe he'd choose me. But 2 days before the trip, Janice called. Some nonsense about a clogged sink or a barking neighbor or whatever problem she'd invented that week to stay at the center of his world. I watched him hesitate. I watched his loyalty tear him in half. And when he finally opened his mouth, I already knew what he was going to say. "Babe, can we reschedule the cabin? Mom really needs me this weekend." And I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just smiled, nodded, and said, "Sure." But inside, I was done, completely done. I had given him years to grow, to see me, to choose me. And he couldn't even give me one weekend, one damn weekend. That night, I packed a bag. Not to leave him. Not yet. But to visit a lawyer. Quietly. Strategically. I took photos of documents. Printed out financial records. I started preparing. Not out of spite, but survival. Because I knew something now. Something terrifying and clear. I had never been married to a husband. I'd been married to a son. And his real partner had always been the woman who raised him. And now? I was ready to burn that triangle to the ground. I sat in the lawyer's office, gripping the edge of the chair, feeling equal parts numb and furious. I wasn't filing for divorce, yet. I just wanted to understand what I'd be walking away from if it came to that. The finances, the assets, the home, the emotional labor I'd poured into 6 years of a marriage where I was never more than a glorified roommate with a ring. The lawyer listened quietly, respectfully, then slid a notepad across the table. "Start writing everything down," she said. "Dates, patterns, bank access, any proof of financial or emotional neglect. When the time comes, it'll matter." And hearing when, not if, snapped something inside me. Because for the first time, someone was validating what I'd known for years. This wasn't just toxic. It was strategic neglect, covered in politeness and mother-son smiles. I started documenting everything. I recorded phone calls, took screenshots of texts, saved voicemail rants from Janice about how wives come and go, but mothers are forever. I even started journaling every moment Nick prioritized her over me. It wasn't just the big things, canceling date nights, skipping our anniversary dinner to take her to urgent care for a twisted ankle that turned out to be nothing. It was the small, constant betrayals, leaving my texts unread for hours while replying to her in seconds, asking her opinion before mine on everything, from paint colors to holiday plans to where we should invest our savings. She had a voice in our marriage. I didn't. I was just the one who cooked, cleaned, cried silently, and smiled through gritted teeth in family photos. But I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was also testing limits. I stopped doing the things he took for granted. I stopped making his coffee in the morning, stopped folding his laundry, stopped stocking his favorite snacks. And he didn't even notice. Not at first. Because Janice still filled the gaps. She still dropped off groceries for her boy, still picked up his dry cleaning, still called 3 times a day to make sure he was eating enough. I could have disappeared and he'd still be perfectly cared for. By her. Then one night, I saw it. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through photos on his phone, and he paused at one from last year's Christmas. It was me standing in the kitchen, flour on my face, holding up a pie I made from scratch. His favorite. He stared at it for a second too long. I watched his expression soften and then fade. He set the phone down, and within seconds, Janice was calling. I listened to him laugh, reassure her, promise to come by the next day. And that's when I knew. He missed the idea of me. But he lived for her. And I wasn't going to be part of that performance anymore. Not quietly. Not politely. Not like a woman waiting to be rescued. If he wanted to be someone's son for the rest of his life, I was going to make sure it was a choice he made with his eyes wide open. And consequences waiting on the other side. The opportunity came sooner than I expected, Nick's birthday. Every year I plan something special. Last year, I rented out a rooftop bar and invited all his friends. The year before that, I surprised him with box seats to his favorite game. This time, I did nothing. No card. No gift. No breakfast in bed. I waited to see if he'd even notice the shift. And at first, he didn't. Janice called at 6 a.m. to sing him awake. Then showed up an hour later with balloons and one of those cringeworthy mommy's boy t-shirts she thought were cute. She cooked him breakfast, kissed his cheek, and acted like he was 5 again. I sat at the kitchen island, silently sipping my coffee while she flounced around like the first lady of our house. But Nick kept glancing at me. Waiting. He was used to me fussing over him, used to me handling the emotional heavy lifting. After Janice left, finally, he looked at me and said, "You didn't get me anything?" Not angry, just confused. I smiled politely and said, "Didn't think I needed to. Your mom handled it." He laughed awkwardly, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. The silence that followed was louder than any scream I could have delivered. It was the sound of a shift he didn't understand yet, but he would. That night, I left, not permanently. I packed a weekend bag, booked a hotel room by the beach, and left a simple note. Needed space. I'll be back Monday. No explanations. No permission asked. I turned my phone off and disappeared. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. No passive-aggressive remarks. No emergency calls from Janice. No resentment pressing down on my chest. Just waves outside my window and the delicious silence of not being needed by anyone. When I came back Monday evening, Nick was waiting. And for once, he looked unsteady. His hair was messy. There were dishes in the sink. The trash hadn't been taken out. "Where were you?" he asked, not demanding, just scared. "I told you, I needed space." He stared at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. And that's when I saw it. That flicker of panic. Because he was finally starting to realize that maybe I wasn't always going to be there. Maybe the woman who stayed silent for 6 years was done being silent. And just like that, the power shifted. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I had one final move planned. A dinner. Just me, Nick, and Janice. One table. One night. One chance for him to prove who he really saw as his partner. I was going to give him the space to make the final decision. And when he did, there'd be no walking it back. I made the reservation at his favorite restaurant. Small, intimate, tucked away in the hills with candlelight and an air of quiet class. The kind of place where you can't hide behind your phone or a crowd. Just you, your company, and the weight of the conversation. I told Nick to invite his mother. "I want us to all talk," I said calmly, watching his eyes flicker with uncertainty. He asked if something was wrong. I smiled and said, "Not yet." That unsettled him. Good. I wanted him unsettled. I wanted him alert. I wanted him to finally see the tension he'd been ignoring for 6 years. When we arrived, Janice was already there, of course. Flawless as always in a silk blouse, her hair done like she was attending a gala. She smiled when she saw us. "I'm glad we're doing this," she said. "We need more family dinners like this." I could have laughed. She didn't know what was coming. But I didn't flinch. I kept my voice light, my expression pleasant, like I was simply another guest at the table, not the woman about to set it on fire. We ordered. Small talk followed. Janice dominated the conversation, of course, bragging about her neighbor's daughter who just got engaged, complaining about her HOA, commenting on the waitress's lipstick like we were on a reality show. Nick chuckled at her stories, nodded along, the same way he always had. But I stayed quiet. Until the entrees arrived, until the air was thick and the wine was poured. Then I set down my fork, folded my hands, and said, "I want to talk about our marriage." That got their attention. Janice raised an eyebrow. Nick's smile disappeared. For years, I said calmly, I've tried to be patient, supportive, understanding. I've waited for boundaries that were never set. I've watched my husband turn to you for everything, advice, approval, affection, while I stood on the sidelines like a stranger in my own life. I came second, every time, and I need to know, are we in a marriage, or am I just filling space until you need him again? The silence was instant. Janice opened her mouth, ready to defend herself, but I held up a hand. No interruptions, please. This isn't a debate. This is me, telling you both that I'm done waiting for things to change. Nick, I love you. I really do. But this triangle we've been living in, it's broken. It's suffocating me. So I'm giving you the respect you never gave me, a choice. Nick blinked, stunned. A choice? Yes. One of us is stepping back. You decide who. Janice scoffed, offended. Nick looked trapped, like someone had just put a bomb in his lap. But for the first time ever, I was the one holding the remote. And I was ready to push the button. Nick sat there frozen, the color draining from his face. He glanced at me, then at his mother, then back at me again, like he was trying to calculate which choice would explode faster. Janice, however, wasn't frozen. She went on the attack immediately. "This is manipulative," she snapped, her voice sharp and cutting. "I've been nothing but supportive of your marriage. I've always tried to help." I looked at her calmly and said, "No, Janice. You've controlled it. And Nick has let you." She was stunned. No one ever dared talk to her like that, least of all me. Nick tried to speak, but I stopped him. "I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm just telling you what's real. For 6 years, I've come second. I planned every anniversary. I cooked every holiday meal while you demanded his attention. I sat at home sick while he left to unclog your sink. And every time I spoke up, he said, that's just how she is. But what about how I am? What about what I need? Nick opened his mouth, but I could see in his eyes he didn't have an answer. He never had. Because he had never thought about what I needed unless his mother told him it mattered. And now, for the first time, he was being forced to actually choose. Not just dodge, not deflect, not disappear into guilt and habit. Choose. Janice leaned back in her seat, her voice syrupy and venomous. If you make him choose, he'll resent you forever. I met her eyes and smiled. If I don't, I'll resent myself forever. And then I turned to Nick. This is your chance. No more compromises. No more pretending. You're either in a marriage with me or a lifelong codependency with your mother. You can't have both. The table went quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. Nick's face was pale, his lips trembling slightly. Can I think about it? He finally whispered. I stared at him, heart pounding. You've had 6 years to think, Nick. You have until the check comes. Janice gasped. You're giving him an ultimatum? No, I said calmly. I'm giving him a mirror. If he doesn't like what he sees, that's not my fault. And then I sat back, folded my hands, and waited. For the check, for his answer, for the truth that was about to break this illusion of a marriage wide open. Nick stared at the table like it held the answer he couldn't find in himself. The silence between us stretched so long it became a fourth presence at the table. Bigger than me, bigger than Janice, heavier than all the words we'd ever exchanged. He looked like a man trying to pick between oxygen and fire, but too paralyzed to remember which one he needed to live. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't soften. I had done all of that for years. This moment wasn't about begging. It was about truth, and the truth was, if he didn't already know the answer, then I already had mine. The waiter dropped off the check. Nick's hand hovered over it like it was the trigger to a bomb. Janice broke the silence first, her voice trembling with rage. After everything I've done for you, Nick, after every sacrifice, every... Stop, he whispered. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on the leather checkbook in front of him like it was staring back at him. Then, without warning, he pushed it toward me. I'll pay, he said, then stood up. I blinked. What does that mean? He took a shaky breath. It means I need to figure myself out before I lose everything, and I think I already have. His voice was hoarse, uncertain, not triumphant, just broken. I've been a coward. I've let her run our lives. I've ignored you, dismissed you, failed you. I don't deserve you. He turned to Janice, his voice firming just slightly. You raised me, Mom, but I'm not a child anymore. If I have to choose between being your son and being a husband, I choose being a husband. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt too late. Janice's face contorted into something between horror and heartbreak. You're choosing her over me? She whispered. After everything? I'm choosing my marriage over this dysfunction, he replied. And if I don't, I won't have either of you left. Then he looked at me. Please come home. Let me fix this. I stared back, emotions surging. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted to believe this was real. But there was something else I needed first. Something more important than apologies. Proof. Not words. Not tears. Action. So I said, then prove it. Starting tonight. And I walked out, leaving both of them behind, with the bill, with the silence, with the truth sitting heavy in the candlelight. Because if he really meant what he said, he'd show me. And if not, then I already knew everything I needed to. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No texts, no missed calls, no dramatic messages from Janice. Just peace. It felt strange, almost suspicious. But by midday, the dam broke. Nick showed up at my friend's apartment, where I'd been staying temporarily, holding a manila folder and looking like he hadn't slept. I let him in, cautiously. No emotion, just curiosity. Without a word, he handed me the folder. Inside, a notarized letter revoking Janice's access to our home, canceling the emergency contact status she had on all his records, and removing her from our joint bank account alerts. He had also blocked her number, at least temporarily, and booked us a session with a marriage counselor. Not with his usual people, but with one I had recommended 2 years ago, the one he'd shrugged off at the time as too intense. I know this doesn't undo anything, he said, his voice low, sincere. But I realized that every time you asked me to set boundaries, I thought you were attacking her. You weren't. You were asking me to protect us, and I didn't. I let you drown, and I'm sorry. For the first time in years, I believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of what he did. His hands were shaking, his voice cracked. He wasn't performing. He was owning it. But I wasn't ready to fall into his arms and pretend the past didn't exist. I needed more than one night of clarity. I needed consistency. I needed time. This is a good start, I said carefully, but it's not everything. I'm not moving back in just because you finally realized what I've known for years. You need to unlearn how you've been living, and that's going to take more than a couple documents and a therapy session. He nodded slowly. I know. I just hope I haven't lost you while I'm learning how to be the man I should have been all along. That was the first honest thing he'd said to me in a very long time. Later that night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. It was Janice. Her voice was flat, almost cold. He blocked me, she said. You did this. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply said, no, he did. He finally chose what you never expected him to, a life without your control. There was a pause. Then she whispered, he'll come back. He always does. I smiled, not this time. And then I hung up. Not because I was angry, because I was finally free. The next few weeks were awkward, delicate, and filled with more emotional landmines than I could count. Nick was trying, but trying didn't mean perfect. He slipped up more than once. He almost texted Janice to check in when he saw a storm warning in her area. He hesitated before we walked into our first counseling session, like he wasn't sure if this was really worth tearing apart his old life. But every time he stumbled, I didn't yell. I didn't scold. I watched, measured, waited, because now he was under the microscope. He was being asked to prove consistently, daily, that I wasn't a placeholder in his life, but the partner I should have been from day one. And slowly, he started getting it. He cooked dinner without asking if his mom made it better. He talked about the future and used words like we instead of mom says we should. When Janice sent him a manipulative email about how cold and cruel I was for tearing a son from his mother, he didn't reply. He showed it to our counselor instead, and when she showed up at our door one evening uninvited, he didn't let her in. He stood on the porch and told her, firmly, clearly, you don't control my marriage anymore. You are not welcome in our home until you respect both of us. I watched it through the window, my breath caught in my throat. She cried, of course. She always knew how to weaponize tears. But this time, Nick didn't fold, he didn't hug her, he didn't chase her. He stood his ground. And when he came back inside, he was shaking. That was the hardest thing I've ever done, he admitted. But I think, for the first time, I chose right. That night, I cried. Not because I was sad, because for the first time in 6 years, I felt seen. I felt like his wife, not his second mother. Not the housemaid with a wedding ring, a partner, an equal. But I wasn't stupid. I knew this wasn't the end of the war, just the first battle won. Janice was quiet now, yes, but women like her don't stay quiet. They wait, they plot, and I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. But the difference now? Neither was I. 2 months later, the final test came, and it wasn't one either of us saw coming. We were attending Nick's cousin's wedding. It was a big family event, and we hadn't seen most of them since the dinner. The tension was thick the moment we walked in. People whispered. Some avoided eye contact. Others watched us like they were waiting for a show to start. And of course, Janice was there, draped in pearls, holding court like she was the mother of the groom, not just an invited guest. She spotted us immediately. Her eyes locked onto Nick, then slid to me, and I could see the venom behind her forced smile. At dinner, she made her move. Loud enough for the table to hear, she said, I just want to say how proud I am of my son. Even after all he's been through, he still found the grace to forgive and show up for family. That takes strength. Her voice was sweet, but the poison was unmistakable. Everyone turned toward us. The air went dead still. This was it. Her attempt to shame me, to reclaim control, to twist the story back in her favor. Nick took a slow sip of his drink. Then he calmly set his glass down and looked his mother dead in the eye. Actually, Mom, I didn't come to forgive. I came to support my wife. His voice was calm, steady, louder than I'd ever heard it in public. She's the one who stood by me. She's the one who showed me the difference between love and control. You don't get to rewrite that story to make yourself the hero. You could have heard a fork drop. Janice blinked like someone had slapped her. Nick, No. he said sharply. We're done pretending. If you can't respect my wife, you don't get access to either of us. He reached across the table and took my hand in front of everyone. That moment, that one moment, was the closure I didn't know I needed. It wasn't just about choosing me. It was about choosing truth, boundaries, growth. Nick had finally broken free of the leash, and I had finally stopped begging for the love I deserved. As we left that night, walking to the car under strings of warm wedding lights, I felt lighter than I had in years. Nick squeezed my hand and said, I should have done this years ago. I looked at him and smiled, not with blind forgiveness, but with clear, earned trust. You just did it right on time. And for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't walking behind him or beside him while his phone lit up with his mother's calls. I was walking with him as his wife, finally and fully chosen.